speaker for the day is going to be Mr. Gurpardeep Singh, ladies and gentlemen. He is a Chief Operating Officer and a Chief Executive of Asia Pacific Institute of Information Technology, responsible for overall operations and commercial activities of the institution within the group, and current total student strength of 13,000 plus at the university, college and school levels. He is also a member of team appointed by Ministry of Education that develops IPTCS as an industry way forward 2020-2025. He is also appointed as the chairman of Secretarial Trainings Committee for the education sector. Let's go ahead and welcome Mr. Gurpardeep Singh on board.
Hello, good morning. All the way, I'm out here all the way in Kuala Lumpur. So wherever you are out there, welcome to the session. And I hope that we can have a very informative and useful session together this morning. My topic is about digital disruption and transformation in higher education. And what I will try to cover is a discussion about the disruptive forces that are causing this transformation or that are motivating this transformation that we are going through in higher education. Related topics such as the changing future of work, producing talents for disruptive future, digital transformation for higher education institutions, and also critical success factors to ensure successful transformation. And all this is based on my own experiences, my own research, the work that I've been doing with my institution for the last 28 years in taking us through various stages of transformation. And I hope that I'll be able to impart as much as possible of my experience with you. So to start off with, I think I want to start off with a throwback, very, very far back throwback. And this is back to the medieval days of universities. And this is literally what a university class used to look like probably in the early 15th century or even before that. I believe that this was a description of what Oxford University used to look like. And this is a typical university class in those days. And you had this academic staff or this lecturer who is sitting at the top at the pulpit and essentially reading out from a book. And if you notice, the students at the bottom there, they have they are referring to something, but they're not referring to the same book. They're referring to notes that they may have taken themselves, or not referring to anything else, because those days there was no such thing as multiple copies of a book. That was the book, that was a source of information. And naturally, the academic staff, the professor in those days, held the power in the classroom, and everything he said was treated to be gospel because it came from that one copy of that one book. That was basically higher education and how it was at that time. Yeah, so it's literally reading for a degree. So someone reads out information and the students are copying down and perhaps trying to memorize or discuss. And that's like I said, that's where the term reading for a degree actually came about. Now then, along came the great disruptor. And if you look at that picture on the right-hand side, you would recognize it to be the first printing press. I think it was the Gutenberg printing press, which was invented somewhere in the middle of the 15th century. And this basically was a true disruptor. And it's probably the first and last time that higher education has been truly disrupted, because suddenly you could make multiple copies of a book. So that book that you saw the professor reading from, now was not just in his hands, but you could make many copies that could be distributed to students, and students now had the power with themselves. The knowledge was with them now, and you're not entirely dependent on the professor to impart knowledge to you. So I would consider this to be the first and large major disruption for higher education more than 500 years ago. And if you think about it, we are pretty much doing the same thing today. Of course, we've improved things. We've got alternative channels, we've got alternative mediums, electronic methods of disseminating information, and other methods of communicating with students. But if you think about it, we are essentially doing the same. That we've got an academic staff sitting in front of a classroom, imparting knowledge from a source, and students having access to the same source, being able to also immerse themselves in that information. But the dynamics is basically the same, so if you go to a university lecture, you see basically the same. So the point being here that education is probably one of those sectors compared to other business sectors that have resisted disruptive forces ever since the first and the last time it was disrupted. So what that means is that education or higher education is ripe for disruption. It is only a matter of time when we cannot resist disruptive forces and we have to transform. And I think the time had come. It's already ripe 3 or 4 years ago, and let's try to examine then what are those forces that are forcing us to transform. Um, um, so, what are those disruptive forces that are causing us to look at digital transformation in a more serious way, at least more seriously than we've ever had over the last 500 years? Yeah. Um, to start off with, the first factor is the digital technology itself. So I think we've seen over the last 10 years or so rapid developments in digital technologies, primarily driven by IR 4.0 and other developments that have propelled the way we look at technology and that have caused a greater convergence between the physical space and the cyberspace, so much so that it's so close to us as human beings. Technologies that we talk about, for example, include things like the IoT, data science and analytics, cloud computing, AI, and so on and so forth. And while the notion of IR 4.0 used to be primarily focused on industrial environments or manufacturing environments, but I think a lot of them have seeped into other environments as well, and no different from education. So I think universities all over the world are now looking at how they can exploit such technologies and bring them into their learning environments to transform the way education is delivered in their own universities. Yeah, so that's one. Definitely technological developments, the pace at which it has developed is unparalleled, is unprecedented, and we will see this developing even more intensely over the next 10, 20 years. The second factor, and I think everybody might agree with this, is resulting from these digital technology developments is also a changing future of work. We take students in and we prepare them for some jobs, depending on the careers that they aspire to get into. But we also now know that the nature of these careers themselves are changing. So this has created a whole new set of jobs and a whole new set of competencies that we must prepare students with. For example, I think if you go back to what the World Economic Forum is proposing, that by 2025 there will be a whole host of new jobs that will appear, and a lot of old jobs that might disappear. So if you look at the top 10, where there are 97 million jobs projected to appear over the next few years, you can see that these jobs are from the traditional domains, from business, from marketing, and so on and so forth. But there's a very strong digital component built into those jobs, integrated within those jobs. So you've got things like digital marketing and strategy specialists. So instead of being a traditional marketeer, you now have to focus on digital marketing because of the technology that supports that domain. Business development professionals, digital transformation specialists, and so on and so forth. Whereas you can see the older jobs, which were more mundane and more repetitive in nature, are slowly disappearing and might no longer exist on the face of this earth over the next few years. Yeah. So there's a lot of migration from traditional work to new jobs. There's a lot of shift in competencies for the future that we have to ensure that our students have. And there's a lot of discussion today about hybrid working. The way in which people work is always changing. And the key enablers here are digital technologies. So whether it is in the curriculum or whether it is in the environment that you expose your students to, or whether it is in the sort of competencies that they're supposed to have when they develop, we all see digital technologies as being a key component. And that's why to us, to universities, transformation is very important in all respects. Yeah. The third factor is the generational shifts themselves. So the nature of learners themselves are changing. So while technology is developing, you also have this new generation of learners. Today, we are receiving students into universities who were born after 2000, the so-called digital natives. And if you try to examine the type of students these are, these are the people who basically are continuously connected to multiple devices. They consider technology and the internet as natural as breathing. So they know more about digital technology from their parents or from the teachers or from their professors. They are increasingly skeptical of authority. So this top-down approach that traditional universities typically have doesn't work anymore. They seek recognition and fame, so there's a greater propensity to go out there and to promote themselves and to share what they know with others. They're constantly influenced by peers more than being influenced by people in authority. They also enjoy absurdity and odd humor. They tend to skim text and information very quickly, easily bored, with very low attention spans, and they also multitaskers in a big way and able to check facts immediately. Now, all these characteristics of the learners of today and of the future have forced universities to actually take a step back and think about how they need to revamp the way they deliver education and the sort of technologies that they need to have in place to ensure that that sort of change is supported well. Yeah. So, like I said, on the one hand, you've got the digital technologies being rapidly developing, the nature of work rapidly changing as well. And at the same time, you've got the input also rapidly changing. So universities then stand in the middle, taking this input in and making sure that these guys transform into people who can fit into the future of work and who can actually cope with the technologies that and the way they're developing. And mind you, this is not just for those who are involved in technology programs or technology courses. This cuts across all domains. So every single domain, he's seeing these types of changes, and like I said, no domain is safe. Now, in addition, there are some other factors. I won't go into further detail, but we know that there is a very, very strong growth in globalization and international mobility of students. More so with this generation, there's a great tendency for them to look elsewhere, to travel and to look at beyond their shores for education. And this, we believe, will intensify in the years to come. There's also a shift towards micro-learning, flipped and blended learning. I think all these are familiar terms to all of us. There's also regulatory pressures, and I think in all over the world, countries are looking at how education is to be regulated a bit more, in a bit more standard fashion, making sure that there's quality that's delivered to learners. And increasingly, governments are looking at how education is to be facilitated through such a regulatory environment. So there's a need to conform to some standards within quality assurance framework that exists in countries. Okay, it's also highly competitive. So, and we know that, especially in the global scene, we've seen how universities have grown. We've seen the hunger for students all over the world, and it's going to be increasingly competitive across the world. The pandemic, of course, is an accelerator, it's a disruptor, but I think we can't dwell too much on the pandemic because, it happened. And I think to a certain extent, it accelerated our awareness and the need to transform. So that transformation had to happen very quickly for a lot of people, for a lot of universities. We've experienced it. The students have experienced it. I think a lot of universities are looking forward to the time in which we can go back to what it was before. I think we will probably never go back to what it was before. So this notion of new normal, I think a lot of people are saying, I wish we would go back to the old normal, but I think it's already gone past that. So what I'm trying to say about the pandemic is that, yes, while it's nice to talk about it, a lot of people are talking about the impact of the pandemic. The main impact that the pandemic had on us is that it forced us to transform much faster than we were planning to in the first place. But that transformation was going to happen anyway, with or without the pandemic. Yeah, so that's a key point. So in essence, today in higher education environments, digital is no longer just an enabler. I think traditionally in universities we look at digital as an enabler for delivering higher education and for delivering knowledge and for ensuring that that people learn, and for enhancing the way in which we learn and assess students. Today, digital is part of the product itself. So when you promote a program of study and you promote your universities, when you promote your courses, you're promoting not just the program or the curriculum, but you're promoting the entire package built or embedded within which is the technology. So you are now selling a digital product. Much like banks have had to also transform themselves. So today, when they sell financial products, they sell the technology along with it. Similarly, we cannot separate the product or the program anymore away from the technology is an inherent part of the product. The experience that the students have with us is part of that product as well. And we've got to make sure that we are able to position that very strongly for our universities. Yeah, so digital is now an integral part of the product that we offer to our students. Now, some surveys that have been carried out with universities, and this was done, I think, this year by Holland IQ, and I think when they surveyed universities throughout the world and also non-universities, those non-degree awarding institutions, one of the key issues that was identified was digital adoption. I mean, there's no surprise there. I think universities are struggling with the notion of both learners and also professors adopting technology. And that has become a key feature of university strategies going forward. Yeah, so that's the top. That's number one on universities' priorities. Of course, there are other business-related issues such as low student enrollments, budgets, and funding cuts, the need to retain students, and the concern about student retention, and so on and so forth. And all these are also then driving the need for us to transform. So this is real. I think the need to transform is real. The need to exploit technology to enable that transformation is also real. Yeah, and this is amply demonstrated in this survey. Another survey about what's driving digital transformation for universities, and this was done, I think, by D2L, D2L. I think is the famous LMS product. And I think universities have also said that transformation is very important or essential for them to enhance the student experience, to improve the course quality, to increase student enrollments. These are the three top factors that universities are looking at in order to exploit technology, of course, to become more competitive and other factors as well. Yeah, so it's very clear that universities see the need to drive digital transformation across the university as essential for their survival, because without students, you won't have any courses to deliver, and I think then the university comes to a halt. Yeah, so the importance of us transforming, we've already seen factors that are driving that, the disruptive factors, and we've also seen universities themselves expressing what's driving their transformative plans. So if you were to summarize very quickly what the imperatives for this digital transformation are, put them into four very simple factors to encapsulate them, it's basically these four. Yeah. So first of all, to enhance competitiveness. So obviously universities want to be competitive both within their own countries and also globally. So to become highly competitive local and internationally is a major factor. The second factor is, of course, to ensure sustainability of the business of higher education. Now, whether you're a for-profit or a not-for-profit institution, at the end of the day, we've got to understand or we've got to accept that we're running a business. Because even not-for-profit institutions also need to manage budgets, and they need to make sure that your stakeholders who are funding you need to ensure that they're getting the best bang for the buck. Yeah. So controlling costs is another factor that universities need to look at. Enhancing better user experience, and this then relates or drives student retention, and also drives the efficiency with which internal processes are carried out. So that then reduces your overall human capital spend, and ensures that we can then continue to invest where it matters more, which is in students, yeah, in facilities for students. And of course, universities are looking to technology to help them to become more agile. And I think this realization also came out from the pandemic. We had to pivot very quickly to a different form of learning, so that that technology actually has enabled us to do that very quickly. Yeah. So in a sense, in essence, I think higher education was already ripe for disruption even before the pandemic. And with the acceleration of that disruption that the pandemic gave us, now we are, I think, in a very good position to actually take our transformative activities forward. Yeah. We also have universities also recognizing that the role of academics within the whole context of higher education is changing. So they are no longer the fount of all knowledge. The focus of academics now shifts towards making sure that we can move from lecturing to orchestrating digital resources, to being able to look for digital resources, digital facilities, and digital content from all over the place, aggregate them, and making sure that the students are able to benefit most from them. And most importantly, being able to point students in the right direction of where to find, evaluate, select, and present information. If an academic feels that they are still the master of all information in the class, I think that's recipe for failure here. That cannot happen anymore. At the same time, universities are also shifting their priorities and they are focusing more on analytics as a result of this disruption. Making sure that they can at all times get a finger of the pulse of what's going on with students, with staff, with their resources, and with the objective of ensuring that there's continuous focus on retention of students. Resource optimization is also becoming very important to ensure the sustainability of the business. And there's also a lot of pressure on infrastructure as well. Students can accept downtime in water and electricity supply, but they cannot accept downtime in their wireless network or access to the internet and bandwidth. And that brings forth other issues such as security and authentication. So all across the board, priorities have shifted because of disruption. And, my own university, we went through a transformative program. We started that in 2018, in fact, and set out to transform in all of these areas. And came up with these sets of objectives, which we then translated into a set of strategies, which we are still in the process of rolling out. And we hope that we can basically achieve our objectives within the next 1 year or so. Yeah, that's just a quick snapshot that I wanted to share in terms of the strategies that we were looking at developing. Yeah, there are also obstacles in that journey. So I think universities have identified that the biggest problem is still skills gap. How do we bridge the skills gap for both academics and students? And there are also frameworks that can help us in this transformative journey. There's one framework that has been proposed by Gartner. I find that to be a very elegant framework to give you an overarching set of strategies. It focuses on emerging education trends and looking at both the learning environments and the administrative systems enables us to put together a very nice, elegant digital strategy execution to actually help the organization move forward. So that's one framework that I found particularly useful in my experience. But then if you want to deep dive, I think it's very important that universities take a student life cycle approach and focus on the students themselves. And another framework I think that is very helpful in that regard is one that is proposed by Holland IQ. And this is basically available on the Creative Commons. So it's not something that's proprietary. You can actually go to this website and actually access this framework. So we've used aspects of this to actually identify at which point or at every point along a student's life cycle with us, how technology can facilitate transformation. So it looks at even prior enrollment. So demand and discovery, every aspect is covered in here. You're able to assess where you are in terms of capability and what you need to do in order to transform digitally in each of these areas. Learning design, learning experience, and also beyond learning, work and lifelong learning as well. It covers all of these areas. So it's a very useful framework for us to look at comprehensively where we need to enhance our application of technology and our transformation, our digital transformation, in order to ensure that we are addressing every aspect of the student life cycle. And I think, like I said, I found it personally very useful. In order to give us all the touch points that we need to look at throughout our journey. Yeah, there's also a tremendous movement towards partnerships, and I think over the last few years we have seen the growth of what we call online program managers. Now taking that beyond that, there's a new term, OPX, which is extending the notion of online program managers beyond just creating content, beyond just facilitating online learning. There's a lot of providers now who also enable online learning, so OPEs and also other innovations that are available. So I think universities also have come to the realization that you can't do it, you can't try to do it on your own. Partnerships are very important in order for us to enable to ramp up our transformation as quickly as possible and to go to market as quickly as possible. So, the traditional notion that you set up your own internal functions to do this may no longer be relevant because, like I said, the important thing is a quick go-to market, and we've seen an explosion in that, in the use of OPMs and OPX providers. It's paid off for a lot of universities in terms of being able to enhance their business and enhance their revenue streams. And we've seen that as well. So if you look on the right-hand side, there's been an explosion in the use or in collaborations between universities and online program partnerships. And I think that, to me, is the way to go. So identifying the right partners and making sure that you can grow together with them and exploit what strengths they have in order to bring that into your universities and being able to transform what you're offering to the students. So this is my last slide. What are the critical factors towards ensuring successful digital transformation? In my view, it's quite clear. I think, first of all, we need to adopt a student and learning-centered approach, not a technology approach. So it's not about the technology per se. The technology is the enabler. The technology is what comes in, but we need to understand first what needs to happen as far as the students and the curriculum is concerned, in order to make sure that we can support the sort of transformative experiences that we want to give the students. So establishing shared learning spaces, integrating technologies and pedagogies, that is very important, taking the student from the time before they join us, right, even beyond they're with us. Professors and lecturers need to redefine their roles, and we've discussed that earlier, moving away from purely lecturing towards orchestrating digital resources, and that comes along with that comes a lot of capability development that we've got to undertake. Students should enhance their capacity to work in hybrid environments, because this is how the world of work is going to be, where different forms of digitalization take place, and they can't run away from that. And finally, it's all about partnerships. So partnerships with OPM, OPE, OPX providers is vital to enable rapid transformation. So I think that's basically what I wanted to cover, just to give a snapshot, an overview of digital transformation and how disruptive forces are driving that, and maybe share some experiences as to how we have done it at our institution, and also share some frameworks that we have used and that found very useful. So basically, that's my presentation. Thank you very much for joining me this morning, and I do welcome questions, and I hope that the moderator will be able to assist me in helping with some of those questions. Thank you very much. There's one question here. I think what will be the future of digital technology? The future of digital technology, it is changing. If you ask me today and you ask me 1 month from now, there will be different answers. So there are aspects such as quantum computing. Definitely AI is going to shape the technology even within universities tremendously. And I think, if you're talking about now being the fourth industrial revolution, we are now probably on the cusp of the fifth industrial revolution, and that's entirely going to be driven by AI and intelligent systems. The other aspect that is going to be very important is AR and VR, extended augmented reality, virtual reality. At the moment, I think people are still experimenting with it. This notion of this metaverse that has come up. I think universities are still, dipping their toes in the water a bit. But in the future, I think it will become a more accessible set of technologies, and universities need to look at how they can exploit these technologies in order to ensure that our learners are ready for the future world that they're going to work in. So AR, VR, and XR as well. These are aspects that are developing tremendously. All right. So I think there's a question from a participant from Bhutan. What are some of the effects of industrial revolution to a country? I think the biggest effect is in the way in which technology can change people's lives. Technology should not be seen as a negative disruptor. It should be seen as a positive disruptor, and used properly, used wisely, it can actually truly transform the lives of individuals across the country, at all levels. So we're not just talking about people who are involved directly in the technology industry, but in all sectors, countries will be able to see how technology can touch people. As you can see, the Industrial Revolution is all about convergence between the physical space and the cyberspace. So and it's become so accessible. It's not, even AI, for example, if you look at it 30 years ago, it was mainly the domain of scientists and high-level computing. But today, You've got devices that are essentially using AI sitting in your pocket or even on your wrist, and there's AI in everything that we do. And so that's why I think in the future, technology will change the lives of people in a positive way. And I think that that's something we have to work towards achieving. Yeah. Your characterization of present day learners is very accurate. Will there be any attempt in future to maintain traditional way of learning? I agree. I mean, there are some universities, like I said, who are sticking to their guns and say, look, learning has to continue the way we know it. And maybe they're right to a certain extent. Maybe there is a certain degree of learning modes that we have to maintain. But I think we can't run away from the fact that we have to be very digitally connected as far as our learning is concerned. It has to be very strongly digitally enabled because that's what the students expect. The very notion of sitting through a 1 hour lecture no longer exists. So people have to sit down for 10 minutes, and then after 10 minutes, they'll want to do something else. And then after another 10 minutes, do something else. After another 10 minutes, do something else. And that's the nature. So if you're trying to go back to what was traditionally acceptable, I think we are just setting ourselves up for failure. So we must transform. Yeah, traditional learning approaches has to change, and we have to be more mindful of the need to address the learner's needs, not just the university's needs. Yeah. So how do you suggest a team leader to help his team blend in during the digital transformation? Yeah, I think this is about leadership. Yeah. Academic performance is given priority, and so I think the question here is, during the digital transformation, when in certain countries the comment the academic performance is given priority on a high competition. Yes. I think we have to go back to why we are in this business of education in the first place. What's our purpose here? Obviously, I think traditionally people look at universities as a means of transmitting knowledge. That notion doesn't hold water anymore, because what do people do with that knowledge? What do we expect our students to be able to do with the knowledge that they've been given? And quite frankly, a university must be there to ensure that the students transform into people who can eventually go into employment positions. I think that's no two ways about it. Gone are the days when we can say, okay, look, here's the knowledge I've given you, take it and do whatever you want with it. We have to make sure that students are deliberately transformed into people who are highly employable, who can actually make a difference in the world in the future. And we have to understand that that's the outcome. So I think a focus on outcomes as opposed to inputs is very important. Traditionally, we university look at inputs, what we put into the students' learning, but I think we've got to start with identifying what outcomes we need to achieve. And I think if we can do that, I think we can achieve much better things as educators. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for the comment. Yeah, thank you for saying that it's an informative session. We will share the remaining questions on email. Okay, so I think there's a hard stop that I've been given now by the organizers. I hope that I've been able to impart one or two pieces of information to everyone here. And I look forward to hearing from you. I think you have I think I've fleshed out my email address earlier. But do reach out to me. I would love to engage with like-minded academics out there and share experiences with friends all over the world. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me. And I hope to see you again in some future forum. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Amazing session. Thank you so much for being a part of it today. It was a privilege to have you with us.